Hey everyone, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling. I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for continuing to watch week in, week out. I hope you enjoy what I do. Read all of your comments, not just on YouTube, but also on Facebook and X and Instagram. So this is going to be an episode, it's a type of episode I don't really like doing, but people that do what I do, we kind of feel like we have to for some reason when something like this happens. Recently found out that the music world lost a pioneer in terms of production and the way that albums sound. Roy Thomas Baker passed away. He was born in 1946 and he passed away on April 12th. And he leaves a huge wealth of audio goodness, I'm going to say. He was a pioneer in terms of getting sounds for bands and very unique sounds, and that would end up having him a very much a sought-after producer. And he also passed that along to a couple of his engineers at least. So I'm going to get into, I just decided I'd pick 10 albums from my collection, 10 albums from different bands that he had something to do with. In most cases, it is producing the album, but in some cases, it's engineering. As a matter of fact, I'm going to start with the earliest example, back to 1971, the debut album from Nazareth. This is a Canadian copy of this on A&M Records. This says it was produced by David Hitchcock, but it was engineered by Roy Thomas Baker. So he started out like a lot of producers do as engineers, which makes me wonder, did the very first producer engineer as well? It had to, the chicken or the egg thing, but we're going to skip ahead to 1978. So we're going to jump ahead to 1978 and a pivotal album for this band. This is Journey's Infinity. This was the first album with Steve Perry on lead vocals, the last one with Ainsley Dunbar. This was their first big album. This had Wheel in the Sky and Lights and a very different sound for them. More commercial, but they used Roy Thomas Baker, and it's got a very dense sound. If you hear, if you're just a casual fan, you hear Wheel in the Sky or Lights on the radio, they sound different than their later stuff. It's a very, almost a muffled sound, but kind of in a good way. It's kind of a unique, there's not a lot of mid frequencies and not a lot of high end. I'm not sure if I'm describing it right, but it's a very thunderous kind of sound. But Infinity was a big album for them. He also produced the Evolution album. And a band that's probably the one band that's most synonymous with Roy Thomas Baker, and it's like, how do you pick one album? I could have gone a lot of ways with this. I was going to go with The Night at the Opera from 1975, but I ended up going with this album from 1978. This is Queen and Jazz, one of my favorite Queen albums. Now, so Roy Thomas Baker had worked with Queen on the debut, on the second album, Sheer Heart Attack, and A Night at the Opera. Then Queen went on to produce themselves for 2 albums, working with Mike Stone, who was Roy Thomas Baker's engineer, and went on to become a very well-known producer in his own right, working with the likes of Journey and later Whitesnake and Asia, and a big producer, under his own name, Mike Stone. Then Roy Thomas Baker came back for this one more album. It's the last time he worked with Queen on a new album, and I think it's one of their best. Absolute. It's one of the unsung Queen albums. Most popular songs on here would be Fat Bottom Girls and Don't Stop Me Now, maybe Bicycle Race, but this whole album is just, it's so fun and it's so varied, as all Queen albums are, but there's just something special about this album for me, so that's why I went with Jazz. Next is an album I forgot he produced. I forgot he worked with this band. Foreigner and Head Games, their third album from 1979. It too has that sort of infinity, especially in the drum sounds. Very, very unique. This contained, of course, the song Head Games, Dirty White Boy, Rev on the Red Line, one of my favorite Foreigner songs ever. It's a Roy Thomas Baker production. One of my favorite albums from this particular artist is the one time he worked with Roy, and I think it's fantastic. Alice Cooper, Flush the Fashion. As you can see, it's from 1980. This is his new wave album, and this was the start of what has been called his blackout years, but this album was fairly successful. It actually went gold in Canada, and Clones was a minor hit. And as you can see, Alice, a very different looking Alice on this album, and Roy Thomas Baker was the perfect guy to help him get the sounds he was looking for in this album. It's a really short one, but I like every song on this, and particularly the song Pain, I think is really, really good. And the next one, he's credited as, I think he's credited as remixing this album, because this is an album that existed on an independent label, Leather Records, and then Elektra Records signed this band, and the first album was remixed. Of course, I'm talking about Motley Crue's debut album, Too Fast for Love. I still think this is the best album with Vince Neil on vocals. One of their best albums. They rarely bettered this, as far as I'm concerned. Next up is a band that was like sort of custom made to work with Roy Thomas Baker, because he was over the top, and this band had a tendency to do things over the top, and they only worked together once, but I think it's a really, really good album. 1982, Cheap Trick, One on One. This is a really, really good album. I think this is a gold album, but it should have done much better, and I can say that about a lot of Cheap Trick's albums. But this has Roy Thomas Baker's production stamp all over it. This has She's Tight, and also If You Want My Love. They were the minor songs off this one, but the title song is really good. I Want You is good. Looking Out for Number One. Time Is Running. Really good stuff. And this is Roy Thomas Baker production. Now, next up is one of those credits that I'm not really sure what it means, but Dawkins' second album, Tooth and Nail. Of course, this album was produced by Tom Werman, but was also has Roy Thomas Baker listed as associate producer. Now, I don't know how much he had actually to do with this album, but somewhere along the line he's got his name on it. And this album was actually recorded by Jeff Workman. Jeff Workman, you'll see his name as producer on a few albums too, like Journey's Departure and Toto's Turn Back, Sammy Hagar, Danger Zone. Jeff Workman was also an engineer for Roy Thomas Baker. And the last two I want to talk about, I'm jumping way, way ahead. I had to talk about this band because I love this band, as everybody knows. The Darkness, One Way Ticket to Hell, and Back. Unfortunately, I don't have this on vinyl, but yeah, Roy Thomas Baker produced them. You know, since they were sort of the heir apparent to Queen, it only makes sense they worked with him at least once. And this is fantastic, as most of their albums are. And the newest thing I have that was produced by Roy Thomas Baker came out in 2014. Now, it's not an album I'm crazy about, but that's more about the material. It has nothing really to do with the production. It's Yes and Heaven and Earth. Beautiful Roger Dean cover art. I'm just not a big fan of this album. Yeah, I've just never been a big fan of this album. But Roy Thomas Baker produced it, and he was actually supposed to produce what became the Drama album in 1980. There are some sessions that he produced that are out there in bootleg form, but not officially released. And of course, he worked with the Cars, and you know, he worked with a ton of different bands. Worked with Ozzy Osbourne. Like there's a lot of people will be doing these types of episodes. You'll see a lot more albums that he produced. I could have done one just on his work with Queen. It's so monumental. But there you go. Rest in peace, Roy Thomas Baker. And if you look him up, I bet you'll find some albums in your collection that he either produced, engineered, or otherwise had something to do with. Speaking of Queen, I got a very, very cool Queen episode coming up next weekend. So you're going to want to tune in for that. Other than that, I would say find something that Roy Thomas Baker produced and give it a listen. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Link to order my books is below. And thank you, as always, for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions. We'll see you later.